Romsberg. Welcome back. Luke Romsberg is a licensed professional counselor and certified alcohol and other drug abuse counselor, and currently serves as the director of youth homelessness services for the Center on Halsted. He holds a master's degree in counseling from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology and is currently continuing his education at the same institution for his doctorate in counselor education and supervision. As many of you know, Center on Halsted, originally known as Gay Horizons, was founded in 1978 by fewer than 10 young people. And since moving into the current Center on Halsted building, they have provided services to more than 2,000 young people across Chicagoland to help them realize their full potential through vocational training programs, seminars, and leadership development programs. So we have a lot of experience on this panel today, a lot of questions to get to. I think our first question, I'm going to just set it up a little bit, and I think probably many of you know what it's most likely going to be, but as we know, there has been so much in the news lately about laws and legal actions focused on seemingly demonizing the LGBTQ plus community and criminalizing actions that promote inclusion and the acceptance for kids and families. So what I kind of want to know from some of you, and again, you could jump in, or what are your concerns, not only about Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay law and others potentially like it, but how can those laws potentially affect what could happen here in our future in Illinois and in Chicago? I know a lot of people think that we're pretty well protected, but maybe not. Anybody want to take this on?
I can start, and then let smarter minds build off from that. I mean, first, Jason, I before I even dive into the content of that question, I just want to hold space to acknowledge how vibrant and powerful and beautiful the LGBTQ plus community is. The incredible strengths we bring to our home communities, to our families, to our workplaces. And so when we see bills like Don't Say Gay, or bills trying to criminalize the parenting of trans kids, first, I just want to say it's obviously causes direct harm to those most impacted. And it also deprives society and the broader community from being able to celebrate, affirm, and take advantage of the incredible assets that queer people bring to every space that we're in. You know, there's this belief here, particularly in and around schools with youth, that it's falsely put forward that the defenders of these hateful bills will say, you know, we don't want to talk about sexual orientation or gender identity too young. And quite honestly, that is just not true. Because as someone who's raising a 4-year-old daughter, I can tell you sexual orientation and gender identity is talked about all the time in cartoons. It's talked about in the books we read. It's talked about in the stories we tell. It is just heterosexual identity and cisgender identity that is talked about. So really what it is that opponents of equality, they are fine talking about sexual orientation and gender identity, just not ours. And that is because at its root, this is not about protecting children. This is about reinforcing a narrative that queer people are pariahs, that we deserve to be stigmatized, and we should be shunned from public discourse. And that is just not true. So I could talk more about, you know, what I think that context is in Illinois, but why not hold space for others who may want to add to that or take it in a different direction?
Yeah, I mean, and do we think that, you know, what is going on in Florida could affect people here?
Absolutely. I mean, I think in a number of ways. I mean, one is I think it could embolden the far hateful right to try to produce these types of outcomes here in Illinois. And I think it's going to start impacting those of us in Illinois, particularly those of us with families, particularly our trans siblings and parents with trans children, about asking, where can we move to? Where can we work? Where can we travel? If the protections that don't exist here in Illinois, the protections that do exist here in Illinois aren't existing in other states.
I would agree with that. And I think it's important to keep in mind, particularly one of the examples you used, Brian, about what is being discussed by young people, by children, and the adults that are saying we don't want, you know, certain kinds of things discussed. How many times have you seen a young child on television and the host is saying, "Do you have a girlfriend?" and to a little boy or to a girl. Do you have a boyfriend? Right? It's already making a decision that this young person, 3, 4, 5 years old, I mean, that's how young they are, have some understanding of that. And in some cases they do. And so to Brian's point, it is about really trying to interrupt what would be, I think, a culture war on the LGBTQ plus communities. And I say communities because we're not monolithic. We're not all the same. However, we do come under that umbrella of being LGBTQ plus. And it's important to really discern what is for the betterment of all and what is a specifically targeted dynamic that we're seeing all over the country. And there was just an article, I think this week in the New York Times about the LGBTQ culture war. And most often it is centered around gender identity, not exclusively, but most often, because that is what people really cannot wrap their arms around. We do a lot of work at Morton Group around race and racial justice. And if you think people have a hard time understanding that race is a social construct, you haven't seen anything until you talk to them about gender and understanding really what that means on a larger scale.
Right. So really go ahead.
I want to follow up with that and that gender piece, right? When we're talking about that gender piece, we're really talking about the patriarchal system that we live in today and the society social norms, right? And as a trans identified person, I told society that I'm growing up as a woman, I am rejecting the patriarchy and masculinity and a particular type of notion that therefore becomes the enemy, because I am not a part of the system that they have created for us to be living in today. So therefore I have become number one enemy because I said that I am not a male, I am not a man, and I refuse that construct for myself. So therefore, when I stepped over as a trans woman and I rejected that particular type of system that we are living in today, that automatically goes into, and therefore they're trying to break down the system, which we is, right? And when we're trying to change the systems that we are living in, trying to change the systems that we're wanting equity across the board. So that is a particular piece around that gender piece, around patriarchal systems that we're living in as today.
So what I'm hearing is it sounds like one of the biggest problems with this is that we think that there still will be discussions of potential sexuality or girlfriends or boyfriends in these, even under third grade, but of course from the heterosexual perspective. And so it sounds like that's what you're all saying, that this is hypocritical.
Oh, absolutely hypocritical. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's important to mention just yesterday, I believe it was Texas, that one of the reps came out with a bill to try to ban children from even seeing drag shows. I'm not sure if everyone's seen the video that was circulating over the weekend, but it's very current. So it's like essentially this trickle effect that's happening with rights, right? So you're moving from different various places within the LGBTQ community. And also to talk about a little bit the impact in Chicago, our youth are paying attention. They're watching the news and they're following along and they're seeing the way this is impacting different folks in different states. So they have tons of questions all the time and their fears are valid and they're voicing them to us. In the housing program, we are constantly navigating conversations like this and they're scared, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
So what can be done to potentially protect rights here locally in Chicago and in Illinois? Anything off the top of your head, or is it something that we just have to be cognizant of and think of when we're electing leaders?
I mean, the main thing for myself is to continue to know who you're talking to as they're talking. I think we have a person right now running for governor that is a Democrat when we automatically know his terminology is far right. So it is continuously understanding what they're saying and how they're saying it. If they're attacking you as they're speaking, to tell you to come to their side. And I think that's a particular piece that we normally don't talk about, is how people double talk when they're trying to quote unquote save your life.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have to continue to really interrupt bias and discrimination in a variety of ways. We have to call people out in a way that is productive and that will ideally change and help the situation move forward, not in a way that is sort of cancel culture, but I think making people accountable. I mean, that's something we talk about in our work. If you've made a mistake, then you have to be accountable for it, and then you move forward. But you've got to be accountable for it. When we think about issues like abortion, really understanding that that is not an issue that we can continue to talk about as women's right to choose, right? It's anyone's right to choose. And we have to think about people who may identify as transmasculine, who may also need access to abortion. So there's a variety of ways, writing letters, getting people out to vote. I was just at a reception with Equality Illinois last week where we were talking about this, and we've got to turn out people to vote. We've got to get people out. That is a surefire way to have an impact on what's coming down the road.
So you also probably all feel like people shouldn't be too comfortable here in the Chicago bubble or the Illinois bubble, the blue bubble, I guess you would call it, of Illinois.
Well, Jason, I would just say that's the work of a democracy. You're right, right? In a democracy, rights are never won and locked in forever. We have to be fighting for our rights all the time. I mean, we are at a place where our schools nationally are more segregated than they've been since Brown v. Board, right? We're looking at a 50-year war to wage against reproductive freedoms. We are certainly looking at the trying to claw back on LGBTQ plus equality. We have to stand up for our rights. We have to fight for our rights all the time. And when I took over 6 years ago at Equality Illinois, I heard from a lot of people that would say things like, "Oh, we're done because we have marriage." Mm-hmm. So I would always say like, "Oh, it's fascinating that our bar is do we have the same rights straight people have had for 2,000 years?" And it shouldn't be. We should, we are an oasis of LGBTQ plus equality in the country and in the Midwest, and we still have so much more to do to achieve those rights. So to build off what Marian Lasaya said, I would be holding people accountable, turning out to vote, and electing people who are willing to stand up for not just LGBTQ plus equality, but to stand up for the rights of BIPOC individuals to, live free in our state and our city without over-criminalization, the rights of pregnant people to have reproductive freedoms, to think about all of these rights as interconnected.
And also, I want to bring in the point around the Chicago uprising, the youth people that was out fighting and on the ground. I don't want that narrative to be disappeared in this particular space, because a lot of things changed because of that particular uprising, right? Around people going out, around people fighting back with the police officers, around people fighting back against the system, is because of the way the system is set up for us to fail in a particular way. So yes, go out and vote. I think that's important, right? But also, yes, go out there and be angry. Be out there, be mad, be out there, just do what you have to do to make your voice be heard, is because the youth are going to make sure that we know it, even if they have to push us out the way. And that's what I'm excited about the youth that are coming up today, is you're either going to listen or they're going to make you listen to what's going on because of what they're needing. My generation brought in self-care, and their generation's coming up with like, we're throwing rocks, we want it now. Our parents asked for 40 acres and a mule. They asked for 40 acres and a mule. We're not asking no more.
And I'm going to speak this a little bit earlier. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I'm going to speak on jumping back a few generations. I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. Do I want to repeat of that? Oh, hell no. No, thank you. I can remember pretending that I was like everybody else for so many years and not really knowing why. Just I felt like, this is going to be crazy, a ship from Mars dropped me off and said, "Good luck, kid." And that's because I was so totally away from everything that I thought about myself. I could jump a few generations then to when Richard and I were looking for an apartment in Chicago. And we went to one particular building, and it was, "Oh, we don't rent to two men." No other explanation. "Nice to see you. So long, there's the door." Would never, ever live in that building, ever. And it's still around, but it's a condo now, of course. And they probably would love us. But nevertheless, I think we have to have the young people now need to know their history. The history that came before them is what could happen again. And that the best way to understand that is to know what it was.
And it's already happening, as Mary touched base on, with abortion and Roe v. Wade, and it looks will be reversed. And how could that potentially, I know Mary talked about how that could affect everybody, it's not just a women's issue, but even digging deeper into that, how could that law and maybe that legal language potentially affect other LGBTQ rights and even marriage?
Mhm.
Do we think that that's at risk?
Yeah, it absolutely is at risk. I mean, I'll tell you two reasons why, Jason. So number one, the right to marriage equality is grounded in the right to privacy. The same legal framework that the Supreme Court has used to strike down barring laws that outlaw contraception, that created the fundamental right to an abortion, that struck down laws that criminalize homosexuality, that laid the foundation for marriage equality. Those are all the same, grounded in the same privacy rights. If Roe falls, because this privacy right is viewed as a judicial concoction, which is what the other side wants us to know, not only is our federal marriage right at risk, but so are the rights of states to, the states could go ahead and outlaw contraception, right? States could go ahead and re-outlaw interracial marriage, right? States could go ahead and recriminalize homosexuality, because once the foundation is ripped away, the rest begins to fall. And that is not just a conjecture, right? The people who are arguing for the fall of Roe v. Wade put briefs in front of the Supreme Court that said once Roe falls, they're coming after our marriage rights, and they're coming after our rights to form personal relationships without fear of criminalization. It's the next step in the agenda.
Wow.
And
And
I
also,
think, go ahead, Lasai.
also, can we say why this is happening right now, of the last stand of the old system, right? Of how we're trying to maneuver people to equity across the board, right? And how the older generation in a particular manner is like, no, we are wanting to leave a particular type of legacy behind, and y'all are trying to ruin that and scrap that away. Can we also bring in the concept of how women's bodies itself across the board, be it cis or be it non-gender, itself is at a war, at an attack on particular bodies, and how it kind of links in when people of color, people of color, was saying that this was coming, and how Black and brown indigenous women were saying, and white women was actually on the forefront of not actually being beside people of color in this particular moment. And we have to be able to talk about the root causes of particular issues, or we can't move forward around what's happening. Now that this Roe v. Wade is actually being attacked on a particular level, now we're moving into a structure of how can we all come together, when we was already saying this a few years ago, pushing this actually forward. So now we're in a particular predicament where women's bodies across the board, and that goes from trans women as well in this particular moment, because if you actually attack this, then therefore trans women are not able to get their hormones in a particular way. Masculine identified people are not able to get their hormones in a particular way. And then masculine identified people that are carrying or do not want to carry are being killed in a particular notion as well, having children also. And explicitly as a person, as a parent, and married to a trans masculine identified person. So this is a trickle down effect for everyone on all particular levels.
Yeah, and obviously people can go and vote. They can be vocal. They can rally. I think part of it is also educating people who may not know. I mean, even in 2022, there may be a lot of people who don't know gay people or people in the LGBTQ plus community or trans people. Leading into the next question, some people outside of the community may be still confused as to what trans actually means, how it differs from being a gay or a lesbian person. So what do you think, or what is being done and what should be done to educate people about trans issues and struggles? And should there be a promotional campaign in Chicago, or is there anything specific your organizations are doing?
Well, certainly in Illinois, we have the curriculum law, which is huge, and Equality Illinois and Illinois Safe Schools Alliance and Legacy Project, sort of led the way on that. That's huge because it's the first time that teachers, and instructors in school will actually be mandated to have these modules in their classroom. And that's going to go a long way, because what we know is that young people don't see anyone that looks like them, don't know anyone that looks like them. No one is represented in the books that they're, reviewing, sometimes even in the schools that they're in, that reflects their own identity. Representation matters. It absolutely matters, and it can change someone's life in a very positive way. And so certainly in Illinois, again, there's only about 5 or 6 states, I think, in the country, right, Brian, that have this law in place, and we're one of them. And so that's a huge feather in our caps. But again, it is not enough.
Right. A lot of it's educating people too, because people's minds can also be changed when they actually know somebody, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That's right.
How big of a problem?
Jason, I know Layla and Brave Space does a lot of work kind of connecting trans identity with leaders in power. I don't know if Layla, you have something to add to that.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. We train people throughout the country and also throughout Chicago. We have one of the deepest trainings around trans individuals, especially around a Black, queer, and brown eye point of view around talking about trans 101s or trans 102s on a national and local level. What we have noticed is that people don't want to learn. People don't want to be in a particular space because they already are dealing with enough with society. So what we try to do is interconnect or have the intersectional conversations of how this is important in particular ways, right? You have a mother that has over three kids and working 2 jobs on the south side of Chicago. Why am I worried about trans individuals when I need to pay my bills, or I need to make sure there's food at the house, or so on and so forth? So we go into having the conversation that we have a food pantry network. Let's make sure that we get you some food in the house to make sure the kids are okay. And then we can slowly have this conversation. What do you need and your basic needs to make sure that not only are you supported, but we are supported on our notion as well. So it is actually harder to really have a conversation where people are already in a survival tactic in 2022. So how can we have these heavy conversations when everyone already know that the world's already hard right now?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, because you're saying that people are already really struggling. A lot of people struggling to survive, to eat, gas prices up, inflation. Maybe the last thing on someone's mind is, do I need to understand trans people?
But that's really why I think BSA has been successful, is because it is this holistic approach that Layla just described, that you're meeting people where they are, you're getting them what they need, and then we talk about some of those other mitigating factors that are impacting your life. I mean, it's similar to work that I did a number of years ago in terms of being the chair of the Chicago Abortion Fund, where, yes, we got women the actual money they needed for an abortion, and then down the road, they were asked if they wanted to become part of the advocates for keeping Roe v. Wade safe and working on the line. And so again, it's meeting people where they are, getting them what they need, because that is going to bring them in and most likely keep them connected. But it's a holistic approach, I think, that makes a very big difference.
Right.
And Mary, to build up, I was just going to build up what Mary and Layla were saying. I think, at the base level, right, there's this idea that we need to make sure that queer and trans folks broadly have their full dignity affirmed, because that is good for that community. At a higher level, there's the understanding that, I always like to say, we can't clean our own section of the pool, right? There is no liberation until all historically marginalized people are liberated. Mm-hmm. I think at the highest level is this view of viewing society as only fully actualized when people are affirmed with equal dignity across all their multiple identities. And I think it's really what I love about what Layla says is and Mary's comment about meeting people where they are. We may meet them at the bottom of that pyramid, but we want to get everybody to that place where they realize we all benefit from the equality and full liberation of all communities that are historically marginalized.
That particular piece is meeting them where they're at and not demanding them to come up the stairs to where you're already standing. And I think that's the difference between what we're seeing now in society, is that pull up your bootstrap type of mentality is not where we need to be. It's the mutual understanding that we need to be helping each other in this particular time to survive and to move into thriving at this particular moment.
And also related to this, the entire LGBTQ plus community, especially youth and especially trans, many in the community, may be disadvantaged when it comes to some of our most basic human needs, healthcare, employment, civil rights. And I know especially Luke works with youth. Lasai, you work a lot with trans. Maybe one of you could jump in and talk about what more needs to be done to help people with their basic needs.
Listen.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Just wait.
Go ahead, Luke. I'm sorry. I've been talking a lot. I'll speak after.
No, I mean, I was just going to say that it's important that one, we understand the unique issues that these communities are dealing with, right? There's very specific, I mean, on top of just issues that we all deal with too. There's, intensive suicide risks, higher rates of substance abuse, depression, eating disorders. You have specific issues like family disownment, conversion therapy, other religious traumas. And now we have all of these bills coming up too that, like I said, the youth are noticing. So it's important that we, one, just acknowledge all of the plethora of the issues that they're dealing with on top of the issues that everyone else is dealing with. And it's we continually to work and educate them, the youth, on how to find outlets that are affirming and safe for them. And it's also our duty to provide those outlets.
And as a leader, I think it's important that I stay in my own lane. And the reason why I say that is because it's important for Brian to do what Brian has been doing. It's important for Mary to do what Mary has been doing. And it's important for Luke down to Tim to do what they're doing. And my job is to make sure as a leader, that I'm making sure that I have a space that is safe enough and brave enough for them to come in and be protected in particular ways. So my job is to make sure that I carve out these particular spaces. And my job is to protect my community. And I am okay with being a gatekeeper for mine, because for a long time, we never had one to actually say that this is not going to happen within our community. We're not going to stand for it in a particular way. And I'm okay with taking the bullets and shots for that, because most of the times they don't see a Black trans woman in leadership in this particular type of notion, or on this particular type of level, having these particular type of conversations, right? And being able to say that we are not having moving forward. Multiple years within Chicago itself, we've had multiple trans women being killed just by living their truths. And that mentally will break someone down. I have buried over 267 people throughout my lifetime, and actually been able to push them to be able to be buried authentically for themselves, as themselves. So does it leave a strain on a lot of people? Yes. Within our community, do they actually want to come out and fight? No, because they're trying to live and trying to figure out what that actually looks like. So BSA is actually one of the physical agents that we sponsor is Task Force, which has been here for 30 years and will continue to be here. And they ask us to be their umbrella organization is because they have been misused by other organizations throughout their 30-year reign. And as we're helping them build and maneuver in a particular way, they're able to service Black and brown youth and be able to be their authentic selves, and also have the language to be able to say, no more will you use my body, and no more will you be able to step in this space without our consent. So it's imperative in these moments that we have Brian and we have Mary and we have these particular people to fight on a national level and also on a law level. But it's important to have people like me and Luke and Tim on a notion of we're on the ground. If no one knows, if they have to contact me to have 3,000 people outside someone's door, I will have 3,000 people outside someone's door within 30 minutes, because that's what I'm supposed to do on my particular notion. So it's imperative to know who is doing what and how they're doing it.
Yeah. And, this is really a big issue. And another problem is just what you talked about, and you mentioned the hate crimes. I mean, this is a big issue, and still, I think maybe not a lot of people know about what's happening in the trans community, but even other people in the LGBTQ plus community, and even here in Chicago, they can be at risk too. I mean, many unreported. Is this a big issue here locally? I mean, I know nationally we still hear of some things, but if someone can give me a sense of, you know, on the ground, what's going on here locally in Chicago. I mean, are we a safe space or not?
So I wouldn't say there's no space that's safe. I'm going to be very honest about that. There's no safe space. I mean, there's no space that's safe. We have to be intentional around the language that we use. That's why brave spaces is important for someone to come in and say what they need and be their authentic selves. So yes, we are starting up a project that's called the Dignity Project. I do apologize. This particular project allots the Funeral Fund, Trans Relief Fund, and Living Wills. Now, we had a group of gay men that came to BSA and asking us to start a funeral fund for gay men here in Chicago because of the disproportionate around drug usage or suicide rate that's happening in Chicago around gay men. So it saddens me to even say that we have to have a program like this, but it's important when someone's fighting for survival to know that I have a will already prepared. So therefore I can fight a little bit harder knowing that I'm covered in a particular way to survive this attack in this particular moment. So the Dignity Project is an important key to someone's survival when they're trying to fight for their lives on the ground.
And is anybody else hearing of incidents that maybe don't make the mainstream news? I mean, is this still a problem where people, you know, gay people, trans people, anyone in the LGBTQ community, are they being targeted? Brian, it looks like you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we hear regularly from stakeholders that they're being targeted. We know that nationally, LGBTQ plus people are 4 times more likely to be victims of violence. And that, if you think about overlapping identities, that goes up if you're trans, that goes up if you're a trans woman, that goes up if you're a trans woman of color, right? So absolutely. I also will say, Jason, on the other side, our community is not consistently saying that the legal system is a place where they are protected or feel safe. I mean, I will just give you some information from what we've reached out and found, right? I mean, we surveyed 1,000 LGBTQ plus people across the state. And we found that nearly half have had a negative interaction with police, and nearly half say that having more police in their community make them feel less safe. When we poll our community and say, what are the places, what are the spaces where you feel most equal? The top place where people feel most unequal in our community is in the legal system, or what sometimes people call criminal justice system, but we like to think of it more broadly. Queer people felt more unequal in that space than they did in houses of worship or in the immigration system. So I think it's this vicious cycle where as a community, we are over criminalized and over harmed, and we feel less protected and less safe by those charged by society with keeping our community safe. And again, I just want to underscore that is magnified when you have multiple layers of identity from historically marginalized communities.
That's interesting that you brought that up, because I actually heard a story similar to that. Last week, the mayor had a meet and greet for Pride, and there was a trans person who lives on the south side in Bridgeport who felt targeted by police and who heard things said to them by police that were maybe antagonizing or bullying. And the mayor said, report this to COPA, the organization that oversees, you know, police for these incidents. So maybe that's a reminder too to people that they should be reporting this if they're
even if they report it, is nothing done. I'm going to be very honest with you, because we had a situation a few years ago where there was a gay white male that was attacked, right? And there were 67 detectives on that case. We had a case of Black trans women being killed, and there was only 1 detective on them cases. So there is a complete automatic notion of like, why would I report something that's happening when you're not going to do nothing? So even telling us to go to someone and tell on somebody else, I'm worried about the police coming trying to kill me or find me because I told on them, right? And if this happens, will I be able to get my life protected in a particular way against the system that's already trying to kill me? I know as LaSaya Wade, if something happens to LaSaya Wade, it will be an outcry. But I know if something happens to one of my colleagues that doesn't have a big name like myself, they're not going to be an outcry unless one of us have to step in to get that outcry needed. So there's multiple layers to that. you cannot tell someone to run and tell someone that can kill them or has the power to actually shut them up.
And the other piece of that is the person actually may not be out in a public manner. So they have to consider all that if they're going to go and report something. All the things that Lasai has just mentioned, the repercussions of reporting it are, again, just like some of our identities, multi-layered. And you have to make a decision on whether or not you just let that go or you're going to actually say something about it. I know, folks riding on the train, minding their own business, just attacked for no reason because a climate, we have a climate that was ushered in several years ago that made it okay to bully people, to harm people, and to go as far as to physically attack people without any reason whatsoever.
And
Yeah, I mean, it really, oh, go ahead, Luke.
I was going to say, if I may add too, specifically to what Mary just said, that the CTA and the trains are very dangerous for our community. The youth in my program are constantly encountering violence on the trains, just out in public in general. And whenever you go to ask them about this, they do not want to report it. Every single instance that we've dealt with since I started this position has not gone reported to the police because they do not feel safe doing so. And it's also important to know, like in the North Halstead area, people like to act like it's very safe too. And it's just simply not. If you follow some of the community leaders, in the bar scenes and things like that, they're constantly bringing light to issues that are occurring within the bars that are, often brought upon by cis white folk who are essentially being violent to Black trans people. And it's happening over and over again. The news is not seeing this. And the only way that you're going to know about it is if you're following certain people on social media. So you have to really kind of keep your eyes out and really look for these things, or be working in the field to actually know what's happening, because the news isn't going to tell you, and the cops surely aren't going to be reporting on it accurately either.
Right, and I'm hearing this kind of weave throughout too, and this is going to be part of my next question as well when we're doing a story on bars closing, a trend of bars closing, but it looks like there's still this issue and disparities within the LGBTQ plus community where it's kind of maybe seen as though gay white males are fine and getting the equality they deserve, but others are not. Can someone speak up on
White
that?
supremacy is still white supremacy.
Right.
And we got to call it what it is. You're still a white gay male. You still get the benefits of being a white man in this country in a particular way. So therefore, if it will not affect you, then therefore it won't affect you. So most, if not all, most gay men that I know still are participating in patriarchy and a particular notion that they don't understand that you are still portraying in a way of patriarchy and moving the system forward when we're trying to fight the system in a particular way. I know a lot of gay cis men that are okay with the rape road being broken down in a particular way because it does not hurt them or does not phase them in a particular notion. So there's a heavy conversation that we have to have, or there's a heavy action that needs to be happening within their own culture or within their own friends to be able to have and move forward to push their activism or conversation around what's happening in the system. But let's call it what it is. It's still white supremacy at the end of the day, and they still receive that particular type of power being a gay cis white man.
And I think it's important to note that all of us have been impacted by white supremacy culture because it's the standard that has been used for so many years. And certainly, again, in our work, when we're talking about racial equity, we have to really be very clear that until we really address racial equity, there will be no queer equity. There will be no gender equity. We have to address racism at its core. And that means talking about white supremacy. I've said white supremacy more in the last 2 years than I probably said it my entire life because we can't not say it anymore. And we have to talk about equity and equality. Equity meaning that understanding that we don't all start in the same place. So being equal is not going to be the same as for me as it would be for Brian. And so understanding that equity means I get the resources and the access that I need to be successful, which will, again, may be very different than what Brian needs. And so all those pieces have to be addressed. And I think the myth still exists that, yes, the community is full of gay white men who are doing just fine. And that's not true. It's not even true for lots of gay white men,
Right.
much less anyone else. It's just not true.
And the rights are still under attack. And another issue too, I want to bring up before we run out of time, and this is a little bit of a lighter issue, but still a interesting topic. And I'm working on a story on this. Two-part question. One, we want to kind of get an idea of how the pandemic has affected LGBTQ plus businesses. But even before the pandemic, we're looking at some data that shows there's a trend in the US of LGBTQ IA plus bars closing. It's a really interesting report I'm doing as an investigative I-team report on Thursday, so everyone out there should tune in as well. But part of the issue here is it doesn't affect, again, gay white males as much if certain bars close. What usually, or what could happen is if a handful of bars close, it will affect a community of color or trans community or a bar that may cater more to other subsets of the LGBTQ plus community. So this can be an issue because people use bars and entertainment venues to meet and socialize and feel safe. So anyone have any thoughts on that?
I guess I would say part of the reason why the bars are not as plentiful as they used to be is because people have other places to go. They don't, I mean, it used to be that was the only place you could go.
Right.
And that is not the case anymore. There are many other places that people can gather and feel comfortable, and they do that. And certainly I know for folks who are female identified, that's meant, we've been losing bars for years. So that's not necessarily news for our community. However, there are bars, and I'll just mention Nobody's Darling, that is really trying to create a welcoming space for everyone.
They're in our story too.
Excellent, as they should be, right? So people have tried to really portray it as a lesbian bar, when in fact they are trying to say, we're here for everybody. We want to be welcoming to everyone. And it is really fantastic that it is, it is owned by 2 Black women. However, they're trying to be inclusive and trying to make sure that people feel like they belong in that space. And that's across the board. And so we need probably more places like that, because also what we know is that younger folks do not sort of draw these, gender lines in terms of I'm only gonna, hang out with folks who are female identified, or I'm only gonna hang out with people who are male identified. It's just not the same as it used to be. And so I think there's a variety of reasons why those places that were sort of die hard, one way or the other, yeah, they're going away.
Yeah. And I want to build up that, Mary. First of all, Nobody's Darling is amazing. It's at Balmoral and Ravenswood and Andersonville. Everybody should go. I will also say, this idea of bars as being, the gay bars as traditionally being a white gay male space. Before then, a lot of the bars were not that way, right? I mean, some of the early bars were Big Lou's in the 1950s, a lesbian-owned bar on the west side of Chicago. There was Albert Finney's Ball, which celebrated Black, trans, and gender nonconforming culture in Bronzeville in the 50s and 60s. And so, when we talk about bars, I think it's incumbent upon us to paint the broader picture. And then I think Mary also brought up the excellent point that, this part about bars closing, well, I don't know that report, is part of this tension you're seeing in our community, that we had these places where we gathered because we were excluded from so many other places. And that these places, bars, were a source of strength and vitality and community building. As we are accepted in more and more places, that's putting tension on, not just in Chicago, but across the country, as these old school community centers for queer people. What does it mean to hold our identities as these historic places while branching out into other places? And Tim, I don't know, as someone who's lived in East Lakeview, if you have any thoughts on that tension.
I don't go to a lot of bars, honestly. So I don't know that much. I'm going to leave that. Okay.
But
I
think
really want to place in that there is 2 bars on the south side that a lot of people have actually been moving back to around people who are not going to the north side, like it's Club Escape or Jeffrey's Club, that are like generally for Black and brown queer people. When you go into these clubs, you have straight people, you have cis people, you have gay people, you have lesbians, and it's an enjoyment to see people actually gather around back to the south side in a particular way, when you only have maybe one night that's dedicated to people of color, or on the sort of side, or that one particular night, we're going to play hip hop this particular night. When we don't really like, why do we get one night just for people of color or to enjoy? Or you have to look a particular type of person, can't pull your pants down. You have to have your pants pulled up. You have to have a particular type of dress code to go into these particular bars. So they're slowly moving back to the South Side. I haven't heard anything about Club Escape. I was just there a few days ago. Jeffrey Pub is like reopening in a particular way. So these particular bars are like on the South Side, like servicing like Black and brown people, and there are like literally dumping in a particular way of like enjoyment a lot of nights. So I really don't want to say like the clubs are closing on particular areas, but people are actually moving back into the areas of like allowing themselves to actually be authentic and who they are 24/7, not just on a particular day or night.
Right. And another factor is, and I think we talked about this, is people are maybe feeling safer everywhere. So maybe, one day all bars will just be for all people, period.
Both of those bars have been in the Pride Parade in past years, and we are hoping they're back again soon.
What did you say?
Both of those bars have been in the Pride Parade in the past, and we want them back.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the parade, because, and we're getting lighter and lighter we go on here, because I want to talk about the parade this year and how excited people are. I mean, the 50th would have been last year, am I correct? And
the 50th was in 2019.
2019. Okay.
Yeah, there's debate about that. The first was a march, and after that they were all parades. We just decided to combine them. People can think what they like. It's perfectly okay. So this will be the 51st parade.
The 51st parade will be this year.
This year.
Let's talk about what people can expect. I'm going to be on the ground. I'm lucky to be able to do this. I've been on the float for several years, never been on the ground along with the microphone and the camera talking to people. But so I'm excited. But what can everyone expect now that it's back?
What we are doing this year is actually what we wanted to do last year in October, and we got canceled. It's history. I'm big on history. I don't deny that. But what we want to do is honor the people or organizations really that keep our history for us. And one is the Hall of Fame. The other is the Gerberhardt Library. The third, although the exhibit has left, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, who had Rise Up, the incredible history of Stonewall. And actually, I just read something where they had 32,000 plus visitors to that exhibit during the time it was here. It's going somewhere else. Someone told me Dallas, but I'm not really sure. But we'll be doing that. Also from 2019, we're going backward for a few things. In 2019, we had Legacy Grand Marshals. One Legacy Grand Marshal couldn't be there that year, but he's here this year, and that's Gary Chichester. We're also going to acknowledge one of the longest running entries in the parade, and that is the Chicago Gender Society. They have been in the parade since 1985, and they have never missed one. It's incredible.
Wow.
That also made me remember that we actually had a transgender Grand Marshal. I think it was 10 years ago, possibly longer, and that was Alexander Billings. After that, it's going to be almost as big as it was in 2019. People weren't expecting that, but it's actually turned out to be the case. We're going to have more than we usually have of local businesses, and they're not necessarily in the gay neighborhood, but we had a lot of people saying we want to be in the parade. We have an LGBT group within our company or the small business, so we're going to see a lot of that. Some new companies will be in, and a lot of organizations were the first to jump in and say, we're here, we're ready to go.
How many floats are going to be there?
That's, from what I understand, it will be somewhere around 30 to 35. That's not as many as in the past, but the problem is it's hard to find drivers for the floats. You almost have to supply your own, which don't ask me to drive a float.
Wow. Okay, so another shortage.
Yeah, it is. So at the moment, the entry list is about 150. It could probably go to 160. So there are quite a few. We're telling people there's nothing wrong with waving a flag and walking. That's perfectly fine. In fact, if you all wear the same T-shirt or do something that's out of the ordinary, you're going to be noticed as much as anyone else.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. One of the things that we have done, and we're hoping to make it even bigger, is that we're trying to get any organization who doesn't feel that they can afford to be in the parade for whatever reason, we will find a way to get them into the parade by asking a company or a business to sponsor them. Doesn't cost anybody extra. They just march together. They can have their own signs wherever they like. And so if anybody knows an organization that wants to be in the parade and doesn't think they can afford it, tell us. We'll find you. We'll find something for you. But that would be, oh, of course, the balloons are back. Tommy is back in the parade. That I'll tell you.
And also, let's add Dyke March as well. Dyke March has been around for a long
The
time.
day before.
They are very anti-capitalist, very anti-police. And I really want to say, like, Dyke March has been there with BSA since the beginning of BSA creating a particular space for trans and queer people, and especially trans and queer people of color for years. And I really want to have that placement, like in this particular space, to be able to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the march this year?
It's Saturday, isn't it? The day before?
The day before, yes.
The day before, okay. And so, yeah, Pride is a time of unity, and so is the parade. So maybe if we can go around, we have about 5 minutes left or 4 minutes left now. Maybe we can go around and talk about, what does Pride Month mean to each of you and the parade? I mean, and being back, if you plan to go, and being back in person. Obviously, people are going to have to potentially wear a mask, still close quarters, still outside, so safer. But if you're close to each other, it's your choice if you want to wear one. But what does this mean to all of you? We can go around. We'll start with Mary.
Well, I celebrate Pride all year. So this is a lovely time to raise it, to increase that celebration. And certainly I participate in many of those activities as well. I've been in the parade for many, many, many years. And there's nothing like the parade, although it's a lot of folks, so you do have to be ready for that. And I think that's what remains to be seen. And I think it's a great time to acknowledge all the work that we've done as various communities under the umbrella of LGBTQIA, and to also think about what we have to do. So again, I celebrate Pride all year, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this month as well.
All right, Luke.
For me, I just want to, I think, because we've kind of delayed so many years, right, due to COVID, I feel like this year especially is going to be a time to maybe let loose a little bit, but also, as Mary said, also a time to speak up. We have to find a balance of both fun and encouraging our youth to get out there again, and also encouraging them to use their voice in a way that is benefiting the community and still progressing what we need for our community.
All right, Lasaya.
Again, I celebrate Pride all year too. It's a different type of year for me because my son turns 2 years old, and my first year anniversary with my husband as well. So I really also am very intentional. Hopefully Chicago Prides get back to trans-led organizations that have been here and actually home in on trans-led organizations that have been doing the work. I really want to push that out there to make sure that is acknowledged. Again, Pride would not be here if it wasn't for Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, and we have to push them notions. But yeah, Pride means a lot. I'm a Black trans woman, a CEO of running my own organization where everyone has told me no and thought that I would fail. So I will continue to push forward.
And when they tell you no, you say yes and keep moving on. Brian, how about you? Are you going to be at the parade?
I am. Equality Illinois is marching. My daughter will be with me for the second time. She just turned 4. And I think, Lasaya, there's something about being a parent that has made Pride a little bit different and uniquely special. And that what I'm excited is to show my daughter how many people are willing to support the diversity of her family and the full range of potential for whomever she may be.
I'm going to cut in real quickly.
Yeah, because we have 1 minute left. So Tim, final thought.
I didn't mention one thing about the parade, and that will honor and be in the memory of Richard Pfeiffer, who did the parade since 1975.
Important point. I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, we have to remember those people who gave so much to the community. Well, I do want to thank each of our guests for their time today. This has been very interesting and an educational conversation. I hope our viewers have also learned a great deal today. Just a reminder, if you missed this, if you didn't see it live, it is on our website, abc7chicago.com. Thank you again. Remember, this is our Chicago, and we all have a part to play in it. I am Jason Knowles. Stay safe, stay healthy, and happy Pride.